Hello and welcome to the School Mentor Podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about all things coaching and mentoring within the school setting. This is episode 15 and I'm your host, Miff Marstinek. Now in this episode, I want to talk about happy students because it's something that I think that while it's a huge instinct of ours to strive for happy students all of the time, that it's really holding us back. And so I want to offer you a frame of looking at how you support your students and what you can think about instead that will help you be more effective. Now, before I dive into this, I want to caveat it that I'm not standing on my soapbox saying that I'm getting this perfectly right. I'm a parent and I know how much I always strive to just make my children happy. I just want my kids to be happy because I love seeing it, right? I love seeing the joy on their faces and I love interacting with them when they're in a happy place. But the flip side of that is that it also makes my life easier. It makes my life easier to parent and to look after children around me if they are in a happy place. Otherwise, it becomes more difficult for me if they're upset or if they're just in a foul mood that day. It is more difficult for me to be around them and to support them and emotionally regulate them, right? Because they're more difficult emotions to deal with. But I think where we get quite stuck, in school particularly, is that we hear this phrase, I just want everyone to be happy, I just want them all to get along, I don't want all this drama that they seem to be having. All of these really, really normal emotions that we all know that we go through, we are trying to sort of erase them when we look at our young people. We're trying to kind of encourage them just to be happy all of the time. And it really misses a trick. It really misses an opportunity for them to get used to their negative emotions. And it misses an opportunity for us to get the most out of them. But the problem then is that if we aren't thinking in our heads, I want them to be happy all the time, it's very difficult for us to say in our minds, in the heated moment, well, this is very normal, and to keep our cool and to say, well, life can be 50-50. I heard this on a podcast with Brooke Castillo. It's called the Life Coach School podcast. And it's a brilliant podcast if you're interested in coaching. It takes a very, very different approach to the typical coaching that we see in kind of organizations. It's very much focused around life. So it's a lovely balance that it provides. But Brooke was talking about how life is always 50-50. And it's so true. And yet, despite knowing that we will have at least 50% of negative emotions and negative stuff happen in our lives, that we always seem to feel like we have to put so much pressure on getting back to the happy stuff and to the good stuff. But the reality is a lot of the time that stuff just happens anyway, if we can calm down and just let the world happen around us and focus more on how we want to show up. So what can we do instead of focus just on, I want my students to be happy, I just want happy students? Instead, I want to offer you an idea of focusing on, I just want fulfilled students. Now, when we use the word fulfilled instead of happy, we give ourselves permission to not try and cheer everyone up around us. We give ourselves permission to stop working so hard at making everyone happy and start accepting that people will go through the emotions that they have. And it allows us to step into a place of support rather than fixing. When we're chasing happiness all the time, it comes alongside, the things that go along with happiness are trying to fix it. We try and intervene. We try and kind of force happiness on people. Oh, come on, we'll get past this. It's fine. Don't worry. Let's get on with it. And what we're trying to do there is we're trying to control. We're trying to control their emotions, which when we actually pause and think about it, we know that's a fairly futile use of our time, right? But we are doing it whether you like it or not, yes, from the goodness of your heart, but it's also for your own benefit, right? It's also because, like I said at the beginning, when my kids are happy, my life is easier. And so if I can keep jollying my kids along, and if I can keep them just being happy all the time, then I get an easier ride. But what we often result in when we always try and force the happiness, particularly with children, is that they will start to try and just please you. So instead of learning how to process those negative emotions, they will just start to believe that the best thing to do is to squash them down and to put on a happy face, put on a brave face. I'm not saying that brave face is never useful, but it's not always useful. And I would argue that what is much more useful than a brave face is someone who's able to process their emotions, because that is a skill that they will be able to take forward. Brave faces tend to crack under pressure, whereas if you've got the skill to process negative emotions as and when they come up while they're still small, when we're not reaching that overwhelmed state, then we are getting fitter, we're getting stronger, and we're getting more able to balance and regulate our own emotions. So what does it look like in practicality? So instead of trying to fix someone's unhappiness, we give them a little bit of space. We allow ourselves not to feel pressure to fix it, and we allow them to feel the emotion that they're feeling. And we can just say, I can see that you're having a bit of a tough day. Maybe would you like to talk about it? Or do you need some space? Just let them be where they are. And instead of intervening and trying to force cheering up, we allow some autonomy. We allow them to work through their emotions. Now, we're in this funny stage when we're working with teenagers, particularly. When we're working with little children, they need a lot of their emotional regulation from us, which is why scooping up a crying child and holding them close and letting them feel your breath and your calm state will always help to regulate them. Now, I'm not suggesting that you're scooping up a lanky 16-year-old and hoping to regulate them in that way. But what we can do is, instead of intervening and telling them what we want them to feel, we can start to think about how our emotions can rub off on them. There's a whole piece of study around mirror neurons, which is far beyond my understanding, but it's fascinating to understand how much our brains can mirror one another, and our brains are where our emotions are happening, where those thoughts are happening. And so therefore, if we just offer that calmness, if we offer that kind of respectful space and holding positivity, then they're going to allow themselves to move out of their negative space, and they're probably going to feel a lot more supported. When we focus on fulfillment, we support people through failure. Something's happened in the world as we've moved through the years, and where failure used to be quite a positive thing, it was just, you try this, you fail at it, you try again. We're getting less and less tolerant of sucking at stuff. Now, the problem with always expecting to succeed first time is that failure becomes such a disastrous event. But actually, when we pause and think about it, failure is where all of the learning happens. It's where we figure out who we are in the world. It's where we figure out how we want to show up, what options we have, and it's also where we discover our own resilience. So when we focus our minds on supporting failure and focusing on fulfillment, we allow for that failure to be less scary, because a young person will know that they've got us there as that safety blanket, as that thing that will keep them secure, even when they're pushing themselves out of their comfort zone. When we focus on fulfillment, our focus is only on the person in front of us, and it isn't focused on our experience. So when I was saying that when I'm hoping my children will be cheerful, part of that is selfish, that part of that's because it makes my life easier. If I allow myself to just say, do you know what, I'm going to be here for you, and I'm going to give that space, then it means that my focus is entirely on them and it's not selfishly motivated. And what's really hilarious to me is that when I have the capacity to do that, don't get me wrong, I don't always have the capacity to do that. If I'm stressed out, if I'm overwhelmed, I nearly always lean towards chasing happiness rather than focusing on fulfillment. But when I do give them that space and I focus my mind on them just going through the emotions that they're having and just being there for them, the ironic thing is that they get through the bad mood so much more quickly, and so I get what I want in the end anyway, and I've just saved myself a load of stress. But it comes from me being able to step down and be in the space of being able to do that. And the last thing that I wanted to flag with this sort of idea of fulfillment versus happiness is that when we focus on someone feeling fulfilled, we focus on developing a growth mindset. Because we're not afraid of the failure. We're allowing them that autonomy. We're giving them space. Our focus is on the support and the long term and the development of them, rather than a quick fix, and rather than just tweaking something in the moment to make it seem better, rather than allowing the lesson and the journey and the development to happen. I want you to take a pause now and just think about the last really happy day that you had. We went to a friend's wedding recently, and it was an incredible day. It was an incredible day. I absolutely loved it. But I wasn't happy the entire day. There were moments where I was really stressed. My husband was being so slow getting ready. He couldn't find his cufflinks. There was some drama with some item of his outfit. And I was getting really annoyed at him. I was so angry with him. And I remember storming up to where the ceremony was taking place, feeling like I was going to be absolutely mortified because we were going to arrive behind the bride. Thankfully, we didn't. And I remember feeling all that anger. And I remember thinking it really doesn't matter once we were in the ceremony and everything was okay. And there were points where I felt all kinds of feelings throughout the day. And that was the richness of it. That is what made the experience so incredible. Whether I'm thinking about that day or whether I'm thinking about my own wedding day, there were points of nervousness. There were points of excitement, absolute joy and elation. But woven into that was a little bit of fear, a little bit of trepidation, a little bit of stress. All of these things make our lives rich and colourful and add meaning. And these are the things that help build resilient people. Is it allowing emotions to happen and letting people realise that they have got the power and the skill to navigate their negative emotions and still be brilliant. We need to stop fixing, we need to stop controlling and going for this short-term happiness, and instead switch our minds towards fulfillment and towards that long-term growth of young people. Just as a side note, if you are concerned about social media and the impact that social media is having on young people and their self-worth, focusing on fulfillment goes a long, long way to addressing your concerns. When we look at social media is that short-term hit of dopamine, that shot of happiness that happens in the moment, but actually long-term doesn't have a lasting effect. It doesn't have a meaningful impact. Fulfillment happens in real life. Fulfillment happens when we go out and we achieve things and we fail at things and we learn things. So if you're looking at how to support your young person with their social media management and how they want to spend their time, maybe you feel like they're spending too much time on social media, then one of the best things that you can do is focus your mind not on whether or not social media is good or bad, but how much focus are you spending on happiness versus fulfillment. And if you spend your time focusing on fulfillment, you will look for opportunities for the young people in your life to go and have real life experiences, because real life is where fulfillment happens. That's everything we've got for today. I hope it's been useful. I hope it's just given you a little tweak to how you're thinking. None of this needs to be a huge shift, but a little tweak, a little bit of awareness, so you can spot yourself when you're going for the happiness thing, because it's easier. And I get it. I really do get that. I'm not my soapbox here. I know the temptation to go for that short-term fix, but I also know how valuable it is to give that focus of fulfillment and give that support instead of just chasing happiness. That's it from me. Have an amazing rest of the week, and I'll see you next week. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the School Mentor Podcast. We hope you're leaving today's episode feeling inspired to create a stronger, more connected school community. To access more resources, be sure to visit our website at this-is-me.uk. It would mean the world to us if you subscribed, rated and reviewed our podcast, and shared it with your fellow educators. Until next time, thank you for inspiring, mentoring, and changing the lives of the young people in your community.